Hello, everyone.
Hello, everyone. So as usual, for those who already attended, we're going to wait like 1 or 2 minutes for everyone to get connected. And thanks for attending this new episode of our Technopolitics webinar on this TikTok and the battle of narratives. And we will be really happy to go deeper in this subject with you.
Absolutely. So yeah, give it a minute or two. Thanks for joining, and we'll get started very soon.
Okay, I think, Damien, maybe we can get started. Thanks for attending this, as I said, new episode of our webinar Technopolitics. My name is Marine Champon. I'm the founder and director of a company specialized in risk management and crisis management based in Paris. And I've been working since 20 years, a bit more than 20 years on those issues, either for international companies, working in oil and gas, mining, or agribusiness sector, but also some others, and also for the EU and the World Bank on several missions, like in Lebanon, Armenia, Mauritania. So happy to enter in this geopolitical subject, as we will see, about TikTok, and I leave the floor to Damien to present himself.
Thank you, Marine. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. So I'm Damien. I'm currently the managing director and a senior tech advisor at Reboot, more than 20 years of experience in tech across Europe, North America, and Asia. Currently based in Singapore and serving global clients across different parts of the world, mainly on AI strategies as well as technology strategies and implementation, and specifically interested and looking at how to build sovereign digital infrastructure and sovereign AI as well. So this topic today is, I think, extremely interesting in that regard. So I let Marine get started and give us the geopolitical landscape, and then I'll deep dive into some of the implications and areas to help guide you guys on what you can do about it. Thank you, Marine. Back to you.
Thanks, Damien. So as Damien said, my role in these 30 minutes will be to introduce you to this question about how this short video app has become in the center of a geopolitical storm. So just to give you some key figures about what is the global phenomenon of TikTok, you see here some key figures about where TikTok is present in the world. I'm sorry. So this is a split about where TikTok is more present. You see the graph on the left side, but also these key figures and this 2 billion monthly active user has to be related to what it was in 2018. 2018, 50 million monthly active user. Today, 2 billion. So you see how huge has been the impact of the spread of TikTok. But more than this number of users, what's interesting to see is the million of videos that are uploaded daily and the average usage, for example, in the US of all the people connected in TikTok. So an algorithm that is very specific, that I guess many other companies would like to know and to have, but which is quite powerful and has also led to what we're going to see a bit more in detail. So I will come back on some key elements of the history of TikTok, going in how it was, how it spread from a technological golden age in China to a global influence of China in the world. So TikTok started in 2012, where at that stage, the cooperation between US and China in terms of technology was quite good. And it was a kind of golden age also in China's technological development. So, and really in a time where everything was possible and everything was still very new. The transformation comes in 2017 when, with this international launch of TikTok, which rapidly became a global platform, and as you saw it in the figures, a very powerful platform. But also, what's very interesting in this period is that it's not only video of cats and dogs that are shared, to simplify it a bit, but you see more and more political content, cultural content, and it's it's a tool for information for more and more users of TikTok. So this changes globally at that time, that the nature of TikTok, not only sharing small videos that are quite funny, but becoming a place where you can have influence. And this political influence, we saw it at the same time for Facebook, for example. So I think what's interesting to understand about this geopolitical issue on TikTok is that it's when politics and also cultural phenomenon goes on this kind of platform that it changes the nature of the platform. So this evolution will lead the CCP to enter more and more directly in the organization and the management of TikTok by establishing Communist Party cells within ByteDance. So a control at the very beginning of this international development of the China state. So what happened at that time is, as the Chinese government says it, you exist because we agree you exist. So the control is about two things. It's about infrastructure. So Beijing maintains structural control over TikTok core infrastructure, but also what will come very after that is also the control of the data and critical data transfer and utilization of this data by the Chinese government. And if we go to the TikTok version of which is in place in China, Douyin, we see that 40% of the accounts are official accounts from the CCP, but also that the ecosystem of ByteDance will spread to other kinds of companies working, for example, on facial and voice recognition technologies. And the illustration of that, we won't go in detail in that, but it's what the Uyghur repression, where the control of TikTok and the content of TikTok was really clearly led by the CCP. So this just to show you that at the very beginning of this international TikTok development, there was a momentum for a China's hegemony on the information and also a battle on cultural and political content. So if I go now into, I will just have a quick look on three regions, US, India, and Europe. I won't go into the detail of this timeline, but just to show you how it has been moving since 2022 to now September 2025, where a deal was announced by TikTok by the US, TikTok US being set to become controlled by American owners. And the important thing in this timeline is the moment where TikTok was considered as a national security issue for the US. So there has been a battle between Biden and Trump about stop banning TikTok or not. Trump was going on the side of banning it, but he has to recognize that TikTok helped him a lot in his election. So there is always this connection between what is the political way TikTok is being used and controlled. And this, we can see it more and more also in Europe, but we won't enter in those details. The ban has been effective in India, also linked to geopolitical issues. It's because this question of opposition between military troops between India and China. So you see how TikTok is also used as as a tool to get influence or to stop influence. And the official reason was concerned about data privacy, which we know was real, security and data privacy, but also it's very linked to a more large geopolitical issue between India and China. The ban is still firmly in effect, and the app in India do not have this TikTok application, which shows also, interesting point, that you can ban TikTok if you want. So, but also, of course, it depends on the kind of regime where you are and the power of civil society also about this issue. If I go now in Europe, Europe approach is as usual, you will say a very regulatory approach, but it's very linked to this philosophy in EU that the question of data control is key. So you see that there are projects to integrate the data center in Europe with a control, with an auditing that is in place. You see also with the Digital Service Act that there is a will to know more about the algorithms and the data access, and of course the GDPR enforcement because of these issues about China data transfer that have made it more urgent to have a control on this data. So you see different approaches, and I would just summarize in a nutshell what it shows about TikTok issues, but I would say TikTok geopolitical issues. First of all, it's TikTok is a power tool of control and of state power projection. So it's really a geopolitical weapon, I would say. It is also about the datafication of the world and part of the hybrid wars. So we see it a lot in several elections in Europe recently, but also all through the world. And on this battle on cultural hegemony of some regions, countries, etc. And it's also about this question of connection, and I would say specifically in the US, a connection about the interest of the big tech and the interest of politics and military interest. And if US has been so pushy in having control of TikTok and having this battle with TikTok, is also because by controlling an external platform, which is a non-US platform, you avoid putting more control on the US platform. So it's also about a connection of commercial and political interest, specifically in the US. So this was the big picture about geopolitical issues, and I will now leave the floor to Damien to go deeper in what it means for you and what's in it for you.
Thank you, Marine. So I think you alluded to it, how TikTok was actually used in the US. I think it's important to understand its footprint. You saw the numbers initially on the total footprint and the 2 billion users and the number of businesses depending on TikTok globally. I think what's important to understand is why is it, I mean, the size of the problem for the US market specifically. You know, it's millions of businesses looking at TikTok to promote their services. They are also sellers who are fully dependent on, I think it's more than 500,000 sellers who are only existing through TikTok as a main channel, commercial channel to sell their services and their products. So obviously there's a huge business implication beyond just you know, the I guess I'd say the consumer part on, you know, sharing and the social aspect. There is actually business implication to it. Before the negotiation and a discussion, TikTok was valued, the US entity of TikTok was valued about 40 billion. So when you see that the final transaction that seems to be right now the kind of the final number is actually 14 billion. So you could argue the original number was maybe inflated. The point is, you could also argue that, you know, they're getting the platform for a bargain, really. That it is actually a small number compared to the full value of what TikTok represents for the US market. So the first impact is obviously financial impact on the value of the company in itself, and that's important in a larger context. Because obviously we are talking about TikTok today. I want to look, and I'll walk you through a few other examples. But importantly, If you transpose that to what it means for your company, what it means in your context, or the decisions you can make, or the externalities that it creates for your company, well, that could be a direct impact on the valuation of your company. In, again, extreme case here of TikTok, but I think that's important to understand this, the potential impact and on things really you cannot control really as a business. In terms of disruption of businesses, there are more than 7 million businesses using TikTok to sell and promote the services. Obviously, that's a huge impact on the US economy at large, so you cannot discount that. And that was fully part of the decision to continue to operate TikTok instead of banning it, right? If you look at, again, the total, what they call gross merchandise value, 17 billion, it is actually a significant amount of money, obviously, that's at stake. So why it matters? Well, the numbers, I think, speak for themselves. It is actually a big business decision, not just social or political decisions. A few other cases that you would have probably heard of in some shape or form. Huawei, I think, was quite prominent because all the telco infrastructure specifically, and specifically the 5G infrastructure being rolled out across different markets, not just the US, but also in the UK and Australia and the rest of Europe as well, has been has been actually a key area of friction between China and the US at the time, right? And so for Huawei has been in the crossfire here, has been hit pretty badly because of the ban on a lot of Chinese equipment as part of the 5G rollout that got actually fully cancelled across the US, but also in the UK specifically. That has obviously created a huge impact for Huawei, who's bouncing back now, it seems, in some capacity with the domestic market first in China, but with some of the other businesses. But certainly a big blow for the Huawei business at the time. Didi, the ride-sharing app, so the Uber equivalent in China, also has been also on a clash with the U.S. authorities as they tried to list, or they initially listed Didi in New York at the stock exchange, and obviously after having heard about cross-border data flows, and it triggered an investigation by the authorities, the U.S. authorities, and effectively the listing didn't work out. I mean, the value of the shares there dropped significantly, and they had to delist from New York, and they relisted in Hong Kong because of that, because of this problem. So for Didi, again, a big impact here. And I'll finish with Hikvision as another example. They make cameras and video analytics software that's been used for surveillance for public and private companies, and again has been seen as a risk, a security risk, national security risk for a number of countries, and the US specifically ended up banning it because it could do facial recognition. It could do so it was seen as a as a risk for the US in that sense. So you see here other examples. By no means TikTok is the only time it happened, and it's also important to note and to that it's also reciprocating what China is doing as well. Let's remember, none of the social media platforms are actually authorized in China, and so you could argue the US is just reciprocating what China is already doing. And so what I think is creating, though, it's creating more fragmentation in this landscape. And I think that's what's important. Without saying what's good, what's bad, that's not the point of the session today, to observe what's happening at the macro level and realize that there are more and more barriers now for global companies to access certain markets. And in the name of national security, in the name of protecting their markets, their own homegrown companies, there are different tactics that are being used by the different power blocks, whether it's China, the US, or Europe in particular, to actually manage that. So protect the market at the same time, use technology and weaponize technology almost as a competitive advantage for the country or the region. So that's really the how we connect these individual cases to the bigger picture that Marine depicted earlier. And if we kind of zoom in now, it's like, what does it mean now for you? Again, these examples, they always seem a bit extreme, they seem a bit remote. And I guess what I'm trying to do here is to kind of show, well, there's actually aspects of that, whether it's a extraterritorial overreach, whether it's some legislation, regulation that could actually hit part of your infrastructure, your application, a sudden ban in certain country for certain technology you may be riding on today. And I think it's really important to have a new lens as to how we look at technology decisions going forward. So technology decisions are not neutral anymore. As we can see here, it's becoming highly charged, highly political, because technology is being used as a bargaining power across these different spheres of influence to assert control or maintain at least a certain level of control on trade, on politics, on ideology. And that's, unfortunately, companies will get in the crossfire of these more kind of macro geopolitical events. So here, like I have 6 steps that, you know, I'm not going to throw everything in detail, but to give you a sense of how to go about, you know, understanding how to apply this new lens to your own business, understanding your dependencies. And that means usually going through an inventory of what we call software bill of material. So it's literally looking at all the entire digital stack that you have, all the applications you're using, the infrastructure, the contracts you have, the vendors you have, and understand whether there's an exposure to jurisdictions, legislation, regulations, or even potential risk, considering it's becoming tensions are increasing between different, again, regions or countries, whether you could be exposed to that. So first is understand this kind of mapping and these dependencies that may be today overlooked, because a lot of these decisions and procurement decisions today don't have that lens as part of the process, right? And then obviously it's looking at, you know, measuring and assessing the risk, and then creating scenarios, right? As you create different scenarios as to, okay, what if this or that happens, is try to understand whether you are exposed and you're at risk and what could happen in terms of disruption. So it's really part of your business continuity plan, and all that usually is actually pretty well organized in most companies. But what is changing is the nature of the risk and the lens through which you look at risk going forward, right? And on the right-hand side, you see how, again, you plan for resilience. A lot of that is part of your BCP planning, with, again, that new twist on how do I track these geopolitical events? How do I track the potential implications or the scenarios on my digital infrastructure specifically? So that's really the purpose of this framework. I give you some examples of what mitigations could look like. Again, by no means it's being prescriptive. It's usually highly customized to every company, depending on their profile, depending on their risk profile, depending on their infrastructure, the way they are distributed across the world as well, and the kind of jurisdiction they could be exposed to. But there are elements that could be considered, right? From decoupling in terms of organization structure, even, right? In terms of corporate structure itself, how you kind of remove some dependencies by creating different entities by region, so you actually can shield the other part of the business because you map it by region, right? It could be like the sovereignty-aware data architecture, it's called here, right? The Project Texas is what has been implemented for TikTok in the US, where it's effectively an Oracle tech stack that is actually being, or infrastructure that's being used to host all the TikTok data and application to make sure it's gapped against potential overreach of the Chinese party, and that's how it was designed. Whether it's foolproof, yeah, you could challenge that, but the idea is to create a sovereign environment that is under the control of a US entity here. Similarly, the EU is doing Project Clover with the same idea of enforcing data residency in the EU bloc for the same reason, right? And then again, I won't go through the full list here, but you get a sense of the kind of actions you can take. Some actually quite big and impactful, obviously. Some a bit more tactical as to what you can do to help regain some control, insulate your company and your digital infrastructure against externalities. And that's really the point here. A lot of this stuff you do not control, but you can anticipate, you can map them out, and you can try to understand what it could mean for your infrastructure. So you remove some future risk. And as things happen, and they will in some shape or form, that's what we're seeing today, that your company will have some level of insurance that you'll be able to cope with it more effectively potentially than others who are less prepared. So it's all about preparedness. It's about identifying risk early and having implemented some key mitigations up front, so you're not going to be exposed to such risk. So I kind of quickly conclude on this is kind of typically the kind of engagement that we do and how Marine and I usually work with clients. So there's different level of engagement and different level of type of work we can do and how we work with clients, whether it's about mapping out the risk, understand first is the why and the what. It could be a bit more deeper kind of engagement where we'll be starting to stress test a bit more the current setup, whether the organizational setup as well as the technology stack, as we highlight dependencies and weaknesses in the technology landscape. And the last would be more operational, I guess, is really to look at crisis simulation scenarios that goes from boardroom to something a bit more practical and tangible to really help guide the decision makers in terms of where the priorities are, where the weaknesses are, and where the risks are, to enable some mitigation and be able to prove these mitigations are actually working. Usually where we operate in. I think we'd be happy to take some questions if in the meantime, there will be a new episode next month. I think in November. We haven't set the date, but probably mid-month, like we have it in October. And we'll be happy to see you there. But yeah, happy to take any questions in the meantime.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Damien. As I mentioned it in the chat, please feel free to post any question you have, and we will be very happy to answer. We still have 2 minutes. So.
And as always, yeah, we'll be sharing the slides and the recording later on as well, right after the webinar is closed.
Yes. Well, I hope that if there are no questions, it's because it was crystal clear for all of you. And even do not hesitate to contact us, Damien or I, after this webinar if you have a question that comes afterwards. So we'll be happy to answer by mail as well. Well,
sounds good. Yeah. Okay, no question. Yeah, we'll be dropping an email with a summary anyway. So if you want to reach out, please feel free to just hit reply, and we'll be happy to get in touch.
Indeed. All right. Well, have a very nice day for those who are on the European side, because the day started some hours ago. Yep. And
yes, and a good end of day for the Asian side.
Yeah. Well, see you soon and have a very nice day. Bye.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye, guys. Bye, everyone. Thank you for attending. Bye-bye.